Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Intro to Wildlife Management webinar.
We're going to cover the wildlife management tax valuation, wildlife exemption. We're going to talk about the state and county requirements, the 7 activity categories, which is one of the things that a lot of folks come to find out about. We have a lot of people that come to our seminars now just to make sure that they're doing the right thing, that they're doing what they need to do, or like one guy that showed up at one recently that wasn't aware there were 7 activity categories. He was told he had to do 3 certain things, and he wasn't aware there were 7 other activity categories and a lot of other things he could do. So I'm going to give some examples of those, and we're going to talk about those. We're going to try to answer some questions for you, talk about how we can help. And the 3 key elements are kind of the plan, the follow through, and to document your activities. So we'll talk a little bit about those 3 key things. I put this slide up here so I remember to tell you a little about me. Again, Tim Milligan, grew up in Austin, grew up in the middle of Austin. We've got a family place in Garfield out near Bastrop. We've been in wildlife on that place for about 7 years. I've been with and so I'm doing this. I'm going through the same things all of y'all are if you're already doing it. I had the same questions you had you have now when you're thinking about getting started. I've been there. We're in Travis County, our property is, so we deal with Travis County. But with Plateau, I've dealt with every county around, dealt with hundreds of landowners, have a lot of different examples from different landowners of how this works for them and how it's benefited them, and some stories about how it might not have, and how landowners found that this wasn't the right thing for them to do. So I'm going to share with you some examples and be honest with you about the stories that I've gotten, and any drawbacks or hazards that people have hit along the way, so you know what to think of. For me, there have been very few, but been with Plateau, I think going on 14 years now. Started as a technician, treating fire ants, filling feeders, doing the fun work here, and being out on the properties with landowners. I tell everybody that's probably that's most fun I've ever had. This job right now, what I'm doing with Plateau as a sales manager and working with our sales team and all of our companies, this has got to be the best, most enjoyable work I've ever done, as far as just overall. As a technician here, I think that's probably one of the most rewarding jobs here. So being able to work up through that, I've been with the company a while and understand kind of through everyone here how this stuff works. I'm not a biologist. I'll go ahead and start with that. I've got a lot of smart people that work with me. So if you ask me questions I don't know the answer to, I'm not going to try to answer them. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to get that answer for you. So okay, so let's get started. First thing to consider is, what are your options for wildlife or for 1D1 open space? So what we're talking about is an open space valuation, whether it's ag, wildlife, timber. Ecolab is a program where you allow a university to do research on your property. We can talk about that later. It's just another form of open space. Ag exemptions or ag valuations are actually it's an open space valuation is what you have. Your property is valued less or valued lower from a taxing standpoint because it's allowed to be open space used for these things: wildlife, ag, timber, or Ecolab. So those are your options, and those are the traditional options that most people are aware of. The majority of people we deal with are either in ag production or timber production. We help people go into Ecolab, and of course we help with the wildlife management plans. What we're talking about is wildlife management. What is wildlife management? If you don't take anything else away from this slide, that first bullet point right there is wildlife management is an alternative ag use. The key here is that it's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to be concerned about. It's not something to wonder, am I going to, can I do this? Are other people actually doing it? Is it going away? We get all those questions. We've dealt with all those questions for many years. It's an alternative ag use. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's a lot like going from goats to cows. It's like telling the county that I'm going to bale hay instead of planting oats this year. You're changing your ag use, or your open space use is what it is. You're changing your open space from traditional ag to wildlife management. We're guilty of saying oftentimes, and I'll probably say it during this presentation, we're guilty of saying that you're going from ag to wildlife. You're not going from ag to wildlife. You're going from one form of ag to another. You're going from cows to wildlife, or harvesting timber to wildlife. So it's one form of open space to another. Therefore, there's no risk involved. That's the main reason why, or very little risk involved. That's the main reason why most appraisal districts, a lot of appraisal districts, don't even acknowledge in their online forms or online data that you've moved from a different form of ag. Because if I go from cows to goats, the county really doesn't have anything to do. I'm still grazing. I'm still in ag. Your ag valuation stays the same. So everything stays the same. The property currently has to be in ag to go into wildlife, but your tax rate's the same as your current ag valuation. So whatever you're paying in taxes now is what you're going to pay when you move into wildlife. It allows you to manage your property for native Texas wildlife. There's these 7 activity categories that we'll talk a little bit about in a minute here, and your requirement is just to perform 3 things. You pick 3 of those 7 categories and you do 1 thing in those 3 categories. That's the only requirement. It's kind of shortchanging people, and you'll see as we go through these requirements or through the actual activities that you're probably doing a lot of this stuff on your property anyway, but your requirement is only to perform 3. And I'll talk to you and give you some examples about what I do here later too. But that's kind of the basic understanding. This is a long slide full of a bunch of words, which I just love. I'm not going to read all these, but why landowners choose wildlife management. This page tells you, or should tell you, there's a lot of different reasons. The part down here can fit into any budget. That's the one that I like. Reduce cost and work, no livestock or crop production requirements, greater enjoyment of your property and healthier wildlife populations. Greater enjoyment of your property was the main reason I did it. I wanted the property to recover. I wanted to be able to enjoy the place and not go out there and build fence and feed animals all the time. It just wasn't what I wanted to do at that point. At an earlier point in my life, when my family was still heavily involved in the ranch and we were involved in cattle production, had a lot of fun doing it with my dad, that was different. Things changed. And so oftentimes, people choose wildlife management because of change. The same reason you choose to update or change, what might be in an estate plan or in any other kind of plan that you have for your house or your property or your cars or anything like that. Something's changed. Your goals in life. Maybe it's, you've decided I don't want to be stuck to them. I remember my dad, being stuck to the farm. I'm at home. I'm stuck home a lot because we're stuck anyway. My wife and I were talking about the other day because of our bird dogs. I've got a good group of dogs that I got to take care of. They're my animals and they're my responsibility. We can't leave just anytime we want to because it's not easy to leave that responsibility with someone else. It's the same with livestock. Those were our livestock. There were probably a lot of things my dad would have rather done than go out to the farm every day to feed and water cows. But we had to because they were our animals and they were our responsibility. So that's what, for me, it was just when things changed and the priorities in life changed, that's when wildlife management became a much more attractive option. So what are your property management goals? That's the thing to think about. Is it recreation? Are you looking for a financial return? Are you just wanting to conserve habitat? Is that the most important thing to you? Hunting, is it the legacy for your family? You want to, leave that property as a legacy for your family. It's easier for them to handle. That's something that a lot of folks are considering right now. Even big cattle operations and big, larger cattle ranches, from the larger cattle ranches to places that just, were maybe more utilitarian in use. Landowners that have sent their family off to get educated and not necessarily have to come back to run that farm, or maybe they're not capable of it anymore. Them to leave that property as a legacy without the burden necessarily or the responsibility of maintaining a business or an operation or a cattle operation type of thing on the property. We've got a lot of folks right now that have either inherited property or are taking over property or whatever the case may be, and maybe they don't they're not into timber harvesting or into whatever the other operation was, and they want to move into something and they want to be able to maintain the land and not be responsible to someone else. Big part for us is while I had moved out of town, the rest of my family's everywhere. My mom's here, and we didn't have our own livestock anymore. We had a cattle tenant, and it just wasn't working out. It wasn't something we wanted her to have to worry about. So that's where it became a real benefit to us. Part of the why of wildlife management, this is just something to recognize, and I'm sure everybody listening here does. Texas is losing, farm and ranch and wildlife habitat at an alarming rate. It's kind of like, quail. I talk to people all the time about how quail die off at an alarming rate. They just, 80 to 90% a year, you're losing quail. There's not a lot you can do about it. Not a whole lot we can do about this. Fragmentation is going to happen. People are going to come. Habitat is going to be changed, and farms are going to come and people are going to graze and all the other things that are happening. We're losing recreational property. We're losing wildlife habitat. Wildlife management was designed to make it a little easier for someone to keep a large piece of property large for a longer period of time. So hopefully it will make it where folks that are coming in and maybe some of this property that is being fragmented can be managed a little better. And the benefit of that is that you maintain your lower tax rate by doing so. So it rewards the landowner for maintaining better habitat. The whole program, by its premise, incentivizes people to be better land stewards. And so by the activities that you do that you'll see in a minute, you're taking better care of your property, which is helping fend off kind of the results of all this fragmentation and the loss of habitat. Again, if you're in ag or if you're not, you probably know why this is important to people. This is a kind of an extreme example on a 21-acre property in Hayes County, but you can see the tax difference. The taxes on the property, if it were at market value, would be almost $10,000. That's the market value of the property. The appraised value, the ag value, what that property will actually produce. So they determine it by what they feel like the property will produce from an agricultural standpoint. How much revenue a farmer could make, or a rancher, or a wildlife person could produce on that property. And that's where the drastic difference is. It initially came about to allow the guy that wanted to own thousands of acres and run a bunch of cows or grow a bunch of food to be able to do that and afford to do it, because they don't make a ton of money. But they had to be able to afford that land. They could never afford it if they were paying market value, so they were allowed a lower property tax value based on what that farmer, what that rancher, what that person could produce. So it can be a huge savings for a lot of people. So occasionally we hear someone say, well, what happens if I just lose this? Don't lose it. Whatever you have to do, call us, ask someone, but don't lose it, because even though sometimes it doesn't seem like a big hit, and not every example is this big, it can be a huge hit. And over time, it can grow. Once you've lost it, it's more difficult to get back. And so, we would deal with landowners who might have lost it, and at the time, it was just a couple $1,000s a year. They didn't think about it. Over the course of 10 or 15 years, now it's up to $10,000 a year, $20,000 a year, and they're having trouble. Then it's more difficult to get it back. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about, what do I need to do? And what happens if – I was asked that question by some family the other day, or a while back. What happens if we just lose this? So try not to lose it ever. And this is an example of when people might do it. If you're in a cattle operation or any kind of business operation on your ranch or on your property, when the profit's higher than the input, then it makes financial sense to keep doing that. If I'm making money in the cattle business, wildlife management is probably not something I'm going to do. I've got a good friend who's a farmer, has a big grain and cotton and all kinds of other commodities. Big farm down south with some folks in Lubbock that have one. That's their livelihood. That's what they do for a living. They're not going to change that. They're not going to go into wildlife management for that purpose. When my cattle operation became a burden, and the input, what I was putting into it, became more than what I was making, which is what most people that are running cows, most people are doing it for the tax benefit, not necessarily for the profit. Then wildlife management becomes a more attractive option. So that's just something, an easy way to look at it there. A lot of times there's a kicking off point. Something happens that incentivizes people or makes them think about, why would I want to do this? So that's kind of the why wildlife management. Why would I do it? Why does it make sense? What are the reasonings behind it? Why do people do it? The enjoyment, the reward, for me is a big part of it, and the fact that it's a way for me not to be, putting effort into my property that I'm not getting much out of. So the state and county requirements, getting into that part. We'll run through this, and then we'll get to the activity section, which is kind of the most interesting section of this thing. Simply put, the filing deadline, January 1st, April 30th is the statewide filing deadline for wildlife management plans. You have to file a written wildlife management plan, the county documents, the application, your 1D1 open space application. Point out right now, if you're wanting to do this for 2020, either email me right away, call us right away, that kind of thing. If you want some help, we can help you still. We can still get these done by the deadline. Even after the end of April, we can still get them done. You can file extensions to get them done. You can ask for, there's a way you can actually pay a little bit of a late fee to file late. So until the rolls close, which is usually in July, you can still file a wildlife management plan or file your application and just pay what's usually a pretty reasonable penalty for filing it late. But we can still actually do wildlife management plans and get them filed before the deadline of April 30th. And we'll be able to do that up until, sometimes mid-April. So filing a written wildlife management plan, filing an application with the county, be sure you document that you're active in your management. So we'll talk about that when we get into the activities. Documentation is key. Being able to prove what I did, that's the simplest way to put it. When I first started with Plateau as a technician and I was treating fire ants out in the field, I'll never forget Steve Parker coming to me and saying, Tim, if you don't take pictures of this stuff, it's like you were never here. So if you don't document what you did, it's like you never did it. When I went into wildlife myself, started to make a whole lot of sense because now my tax valuation is tied to it, just like all of our landowners are when we're doing our activities for them. That's why we're so diligent about documenting activities and why we've created all these systems for documenting activities and making it easy to understand to where we can submit those to counties and they understand this is what this person did and it makes perfect sense. And then documentation of previous activities, that's just on there to kind of let people know that when they file, oftentimes sometimes the county may ask them to document or be able to prove what they did before. What was your prior use? Was it cattle? Was it farming? Whatever it was. So if I say I was baling hay, I want to have some evidence that I was baling hay, type of thing. So oftentimes counties don't ask that, but sometimes they do, and we just want to make sure people are aware that you may be asked to document your previous activities. Question I get sometimes, since we're on the government side of this or the county requirement side of this, is this going away? Is there a chance that wildlife management can go away? It's not going anywhere. It amended the Constitution. It was passed in passed in 95. Our company was started in 97 because not enough people were getting to do this. So our founders decided that they'd put a private company together that would be able to help a whole lot of people, and so more people could take advantage of this and take advantage of the law and exercise their rights on their property and manage their property the way they wanted to. But it amended the Constitution in 95. The voters passed it, voted it in. It's not going anywhere unless we vote it out. And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of folks in the legislature who own property that's in wildlife management. A lot of folks in our state. You'll see that in a minute. There's a ton of folks that are in wildlife management now, and it just gets more acceptable and more understood every year. It does mean actively managing the land. I like to point this out because it is not it is not a get out of jail free card. It doesn't mean that I'm going to sit on my porch and watch the deer walk by. You're expected to be active in your management. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And it just allows people to manage ag land and to have their ag valuation, ag exemption, by managing for native Texas wildlife. And that's kind of the gist of it. It's a fairly simple law, but it's I say simple. It has a lot of ins and outs to it that I think that's what kept people from doing it in the beginning, and it's really taking off. Has in the last 10 years or so, really becoming a lot more popular because if you read into it, it's not that hard to understand. You're expected to be active. You're expected to manage for native animals, and it can be for food, medicine, or recreation. If you look at that and you figure out how to do it, and folks like us that can help you get into it and understand it, it's not that hard to do. It'll again, same slide basically, but allowed for private land and wildlife management. This is the part where I want you to see. It's over 20 years ago that it was passed. There's over 5 million acres in wildlife management statewide right now. We help about 300 landowners a year make this switch. I think it's almost 4,000 landowners altogether that we've written wildlife management plans for, and we've converted over 1 million. We've helped convert over 1 million acres from traditional ag to wildlife. It's a great number, that 1 million acres. We help these folks. They let us do it. We've been honored to work with that many people. The key to me is that it's not a million. It's not 10, 100,000 acre properties or a bunch of 50,000 or 20,000 acre properties. It's right around 4,000 landowners. I think the average is right around 200 to 250 acres is the kind of the average property. Many down below that, and a few up above it. Most of our properties are just average landowners who are looking for a better use for their land. The fact that we work with the number of landowners is the important thing for me, more so even than 1 million acres. So now we get into the good stuff. And again, we'll work through these, through the activities. We'll talk about the activities a little bit, give examples of each one. And if you have questions as we go, feel free to ask them or ask questions at the end. But these activities, I think what you'll find, the thing to think about is, are these things I'm already doing? Or what am I already doing that might qualify? That's one of the things that we can help you with. When a Plateau biologist comes out to look at your property and work on a wildlife management plan, we visit with you and talk to you about the things that you're already doing on the property, and we go through all these activities and all the different examples and talk to you about what you're doing. And there are a lot of things that you're already doing that are going to qualify to where you really don't have to change your practices or what you're doing on the property as much as just knowing how to make it fit in and documenting what you do. So the 7 activity categories. The other thing I want to point out, I don't have it up here, but our website's down on the bottom of every single one of these pages, plateauwildlife.com. On our website, there's a page under tools on our website that is I think it's publications. And under the publications, there are books that basically go through this whole presentation. There's a couple of different types of overview books. This will be recorded on the website, but there are examples of all these activities, examples of all the different categories in those books. So if you ever want to read through that, you can. But lots of good stuff on our website at plateauwildlife.com. The wildlife management section, the tools section, and of course the event section where these webinars will be. So those are the activity categories, and we'll run through all 7 of them and give a few examples. Habitat control. So game population management, if you're a hunter and you're hunting on your property and there's a reason for you to be, sometimes, depending on how you're doing that, whether it's prescribed by a biologist or whether you're someone like me who I did a camera survey on our property, and it's pretty easy to see that there's way too many deer. And so it's not hard to justify that by removing some animals, I'm improving the habitat. We're removing mouths from the property. So game population management, brush management. Brush management can take all kinds of forms. Everybody immediately goes to, some of the major brush management things you see where people are clearing large swaths of cedar or something like that, or wanting to eradicate, certain types of plants. It doesn't have to be that. We do a lot of brush sculpting at our place, managing areas, designated areas to improve the habitat, not to get rid of all of it, to improve it and make it, open it up a little bit here and there. We've got a cedar, we've got a lot of mesquite on our place where we, now, at one point we did hit a big area had a guy come out with a machine and clear it all. And now our activity is just going through and maintaining that and cutting with loppers, the little ones that are coming back up. Lots of different types of brush management. Another form of habitat control for a lot of folks is removing the livestock from the property. So once you move your cows the first year, oftentimes you can get credit for a habitat control activity because now you remove mouths, you're removing pressure from the property. If you have a riparian area, which is the area down by the stream, basically, if you've got a stream or a river on your property, this green area that's below the upland and the lowland. The lowland being where the water is. So between the water and the upland is this riparian zone, which is your very fertile, very ripe, area where if you have cows, that's where they hang out most of the time. And that's where a lot of the wildlife are going to be. Anything you can do to protect that area and help it recover is a very productive activity, and you can get 10 years worth of credit for doing activities there. Anything water related or riparian zone related is often going to get you more credit because of the substantial benefit that it has to the property, and because it does require quite a bit of maintenance. So removing livestock or isolating livestock, excluding livestock from a riparian area may get you more credit. Just moving them to a different part of the property as part of your wildlife management plan, and excluding some, even wildlife from those areas can help. But there's a lot of different activities you can do. A lot of things you can do for habitat control. Native grass reseeding, things like that. One of the reasons why we write 5-year plans, so we'll get into our plan in a minute, but we write a 5-year wildlife management plan, which basically satisfies the filing requirements for the county for 5 years. And most counties all counties pretty much have accepted that, okay, a wildlife management plan can be done for 5 years because those recommendations should last that long. Part of the reason for that is that some people do things like native grass reseeding or planting native plants or different things like that take a little time or treating prickly pear even or treating exotic plants that take time to show whether they're actually working or not. Planting native grasses, sometimes the first year or two you don't see much. You want to have a plan and you want to follow through on that and give it time to say, okay, I want to keep doing that, or maybe that's not something I want to do because it didn't work out so well. So that's why a 5-year plan is sometimes important for those specifically those habitat control things that may not show a result for a longer period of time. Erosion control. Here's your second activity category. Erosion control doesn't have to be, it could be pond or tank construction. So if you're building a pond, building a lake, or a tank on your property, could be that. Doesn't have to be construction, could just be fixing a spillway like the picture you see here. Going through and repairing that spillway. The reason you get 10 years worth of activity for this is that it is intended or it's kind of understood that you're going to have to do some maintenance of it. We've done some erosion control on our property in a big culvert where we dropped a bunch of brush and boulders and things down in this washed out area. Big gully washer comes through, I may have to go down there and readjust that and make sure it's still working. We build little check dams that push water off into the main into the pasture off the road. When a big gully washer comes through and it knocks those check dams down, we want to go back through and repair those. Good example of erosion control, if you have a stream or a shallow stream on your property, is taking rocks or any kind of riprap and stacking them in that shallow stream in several different areas to slow the water down whenever it's coming through. So when the water starts rushing through, it's carrying soil from your property. Anything you can do to slow that water down is going to benefit you. We talked about brush management, whether it's clearing cedar or removing mesquite or anything like that. Clearing cedar on your property and then using that brush somewhere else as a mechanism for slowing water on the property, putting it along a hillside, perpendicular to the hillside. However you do it, anything left on the ground like that is going to slow that water down. Anytime water is sheeting off your property, it's going to help slow it down and save some of your soil and keep it on your property. Again, there's a lot of different ways you can do erosion control. The idea that they require some maintenance and that they basically they have an increased value kind of what you do in erosion control, because it's allowing water to percolate down into the property or and keeping the soil on the property. It's a substantial thing to do. Oftentimes these activities cost a little extra money. Obviously building a dam, building a pond might cost it's a little more costly. And because of that, they take that into account and they give a 10-year credit for that. An example of how that can work for you is, let's say you've got an existing stock pond that's dried up. Ours did, and we removed the silt out of the bottom of it. Removing that silt is an erosion control activity. We took a little skid steer, removed some silt out of the bottom of it. As the rains come and as the water comes back and we have several different storms, more and more silt's going to collect in the bottom of that thing again. 10 years from now, when it dries out again, I'm going to do that again and get another 10 years out of it. So those are erosion, and I'm going to take that topsoil and move it to another part of the property. So great activities there. Erosion control are wonderful activities. Call and ask us about any of these. We can always give you recommendations about them. Better yet, have us do a wildlife management plan for you, and you'll get all of them in your plan. Predator control. This is a good time to talk about documentation. We do fire ant control on our property. We do hog management. Lots of folks, you've probably never seen never seen a fire ant, never seen a hog. I'm sure everybody has the opportunity to do any of those. The state's recommendations or state stance on hogs is eradication. So as many as you want to take care of, get rid of, you can. Fire ants, you can treat in the spring and knock them down in the fall, then treat in the fall and knock them down in the spring. They're great ways to do fire ant treatment. I learned when I started here, I didn't know this, but there are native Texas fire ants. And you want those. They're good to have. The big red harvester ants are good to have. So the way we treat fire ants is a spot mound treatment where we're treating individual mounds. So other insects are not as likely to get that poison. That's a very light poison. It's all, not going to hurt anything else, but it will hurt, it will kill other insects. So we're careful to only treat imported red fire ants, which are the bad ones. They're the mean guys that get you every spring when you're out at the park or on your property. Treating those, and there's a certain amount that you have to treat. So in the plan, it's written in how many acres of fire ant treatment you need to do every year. It's not a hard thing to do, but you do have to document it. And that's why people a lot of times will hire us to do it. That's what again, like I said, I started at the company treating fire ants temporarily as during a fall when we were busy doing a whole lot of fire ant treatment. Is like I said, a lot of folks want to do it. They don't necessarily want to document it all the time. If you're like me, we treat fire ants on our property all the time, but a few days a year, we'll go out there with the purpose of treating a specific area, a 10-acre section, let's say, and we'll walk that area and we'll treat those and we'll document what we're doing that day. Later on, a month from now, whatever, I'll be treating fire ants. We're driving through the farm on a buggy. We'll treat a fire ant mound when we see it. I don't take pictures of every one. I don't stop every time and think about, did I document that? But I designate a time to make sure that I'm documenting my wildlife management activity. Feral hogs is another great example. We removed a lot of hogs from our place. If I didn't take any pictures of them, there's no way for me to prove to the county that I did. They don't doubt you, they don't mistrust you, but the easiest thing you can do is provide documentation. I was talking to an appraiser the other day, talking to him about our annual report, and her comment was, please don't forget to send please don't forget to send supporting documentation with your annual report. I'm sure she's used to saying that to everyone. She's gotten 7 from me now, and they've always been fine, and they've never had a problem with them. But that's, I'm sure she gets a lot of annual reports of the activities that you do throughout the year. I'm sure she gets a lot of those that are just the report. She said, don't just send the report. Please don't forget to send your supporting documentation. I think that's the most important thing. They see that, they know you did the things you were supposed to do, they can identify with it, and then they can move on. The easier we make their job, the easier we make the appraisal district's job, the better off it is on all of us. So the better documentation you can keep, the more you actually do this stuff and understand why you're doing it, the better off you are. There are native predators. I always advise people, if you're going to look at doing native predators, talk to a biologist, make sure you've got a predator problem. If you're thinking about, raccoons or foxes or coyotes or something like that, make sure you've got a problem before you worry about getting rid of native predators, because they are native animals. The other thing to consider is, this is a good time to talk about, is this activity appropriate for my wildlife management plan or for what I've told the county I'm going to do? One of the good reasons to hire someone like Plateau to do your plan is that we're going to make sure you get it right. If I take this and I say, let's say I did my plan for white-tailed deer. This is a great example. Say I did my plan for white-tailed deer, and that's all I did. And I told the county at the end of the year that I trapped 5 raccoons and moved them off my property. The county could turn that down and say that a raccoon is not a deer predator. Well, I might think of it as a deer predator because I see them they're all over my deer feeders. They're out there all the time. I've seen raccoons eat a lot of deer corn. I've never seen one take down a deer. And that, because of that, it's not really an appropriate activity. Now you flip that around, and in your plan, you write it for white-tailed deer, small mammals, turkey, songbirds, quail, that kind of thing. All of a sudden, raccoons are a predator, and they do count. So being mindful of what's in your plan, maybe talking to a professional about it, makes it a lot easier. And you'll know that your plan is appropriate for what you're doing, and that the activities are appropriate and going to qualify. So supplemental food, we'll get through the rest of these. I know I'm going on here for a minute. Supplemental food's a great one because it's easy. It's easy to show folks. It's easy, for the county to see that I've got these on my property. It's an easy one to explain. It's an easy one to understand. Wildlife management is activity-based. It's not results-based, which, I want to be clear on that. You're required to do the activities. You need to do your activities. You don't have to necessarily be better at it. You don't have to have more songbirds or more turkey or better deer. That's not the goal. The goal is to manage the habitat to that end, to where it is helping you maintain better populations and making them more healthy. The nice thing about feeders and things like that you can see is you kind of get to see, am I getting some results out of this? If the feeder's being used and the water's being used, it's easy to see, and you can see the animals that are using it. If I go back through some of the notes I used to take when I did site visits on folks' properties, I would look at, and I think I got more of a kick out of the animal trails and the scat and whatever else was around these things, as opposed to how much they were being used. Just seeing that animals are starting to use them is fantastic. But lots of different ways of supplemental food. Grazing management, we move cows sometimes on and off our property. Having cows come out there and beat the place up for a little while helps that low green growth grow up. Food plots east of 35 is not a bad idea. Feeders and mineral supplementation, as you see here. These are some of our products that we handle. But any type of feeder, mineral supplementation, strip disking, disking an area. So you take a coastal pasture that you've let go, deciding not to bale it anymore, going out there and breaking that ground up. I was talking to a landowner about that just the other day. Going out and breaking that ground up, you're going to get weeds, you're going to get forbs, you're going to get lots of little low green growth, which is what wildlife like. If you look around right now, we're getting into kind of spring and things are starting to green up. People who have strip mowed and mowed strips in their pastures, those things are really greening up. And most of the wildlife end up out in the middle of those things because they can see, they feel comfortable out there, and there's an ample supply of food. So anything you can do to supply some low green growth and new growth is a good form of supplemental food. Supplemental water is the next one. Supplemental water is a great activity. Again, they call it a 10-year activity, but it's pretty much just it's a long-standing activity. If you put a water source out for your wildlife, whether it's a rain collection system like this one of ours, whether it's a well or trough that you've modified in some way to make it easier for wildlife to get in and out of it, that type of thing, it lasts for as long as it's working. So as long as I've got this water system out there and I can show that that pan's got water in it and I'm maintaining it, if it goes dry, maybe you go out and put a little extra water in the barrel. We sell certain, several different sizes of this thing. They're great if you don't want to don't want to have it hooked up to a well or anything like that. You can put this out on a property that doesn't otherwise have any water, and all of a sudden you have a supplemental water activity, and your activity is going out there and maintaining it, making sure it's functioning, taking some photographs of it throughout the year, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 photographs to show that throughout this year I was providing water for wildlife. So those are great activities. Existing troughs can be modified, letting your windmills or other troughs kind of overflow a little bit to have some groundwater, or modifying them by stacking rocks on the outside and inside to where if a small animal falls in, one, they can get up the ramp to the inside, and if they do fall in, you've got a ramp on the inside to where they can get out. Those are great forms of supplemental water, and they last as long as you have them out there. You don't have to do a new one every 10 years. You just take a few photographs to document that it's still functioning. Anytime you have to repair it or make some changes to it, you document that too. Then that just kind of helps substantiate what you're doing and how you're active in your management. Your activity here is being the person and being the person responsible for making sure that it's actually working. Supplemental shelter. Next activity, we're getting towards the end here. Nest boxes, you see a lot of those. We do a lot of nest boxes on people's properties. I've got them on mine. I wish I could pull up the picture we took yesterday. I was out doing a little scavenger hunt for the kids, just taking pictures of things around the house, and I opened up a nest box, and sure enough, there's a little titmouse in there sitting on eggs. Really cool, fun thing to do, especially for families. I have landowners that have nest boxes on their property. We have a lot of them that we check. Birdhouses where we go out and check them and we document them, we show what was in them, and that's your activity. Hanging the nest box isn't what qualifies you. It's going out there and checking on it and making sure it's still functioning and doing what it's supposed to do. That's the qualifying activity, being active in your management. So those same nest boxes can be out there all year long, every year for years to come, and your activity is going out there and checking them a couple times a year to make sure they're not full of wasps. This one that had an interesting story too, this one that had a titmouse in it yesterday, last year had I guess it was a rat snake. I don't know exactly what kind of snake. When I opened it up, it had a snake in it. No nest, but a snake. And he was just in there hanging out. We kind of shuffled him on his way to, again, now it's a safe cavity for birds. And that means he didn't come back, but he hasn't come back yet. So anyway, nest boxes are great. The picture on the right is an example of, it's either an example of strip mowing where they've mowed a strip there at the end, or fence line management, another form of supplemental shelter. Fence line management's a cool activity. Basically, that means leaving your fence line alone. You can see a little growth growing up on the bottom of this fence line right here, where sometimes you might clear that fence line, take a weed eater and clear it so there's no issues. Allowing that thing to grow. The little birds are going to land on that fence. They're going to drop their little prepackaged seeds, and you're going to have a bunch of interesting growth and a bunch of habitat grow up right there along that fence line. So you can actually get credit for not doing anything. Pasture management, strip mowing, brush piles, all those, very good supplemental shelter activities. All of them, again, have a certain amount that you need to do. That's what we explain in a wildlife management plan. That's what, that's the intensity levels and how much of this stuff you need to do is what you get when you visit with a biologist, or when you can look all this stuff up. It's on Texas Parks and Wildlife's website, and the comptroller has the information as well, as far as how much of different things that you need to do. Let's see, and then the last of the activities is census counts. Again, going back to the wildlife management's activity-based, not results-based. It's kind of nice to see what's going on and to see what kind of results you're getting. So any kind of census count, whether it's a bird survey, a spotlight count, we do a lot of camera surveys. We do a lot of bird surveys on landowners' properties. That's an example. That's some of our folks out doing a bird survey on a property. Those are really cool because we have these biologists who are birders who know the sounds of these birds. And I can walk out to a property right now and I can see 4 or 5 different birds that I know. They'll hear 20. or 15 or 20 birds, and be able to identify what's on that landowner's property, and then each year do it again and again and again. You get a baseline, you get to see trends and see kind of what's happening, how your property is benefiting from the activities that you're doing in other areas. That better habitat, that more feed available and water available is going to bring more of various types of animals. So camera surveys and bird surveys and things can help you do that. These don't have to be done by a professional. You can do them yourself. The important thing to consider there is always make sure that you have some kind of a method to it. Make sure you know why you're doing it. There's methods for some of these surveys, available. We do camera surveys. We do stand counts, where we sit in a blind and basically photograph and document the animals that we see. But we do it over a certain period of time. We bait a certain area maybe for our camera surveys, and then we try to basically tell a story of what does this tell me about my property. If I see animals I didn't see the year before, I acknowledge that, and I try to learn something about how's my property changing through this wildlife management thing. And if I do that, I feel like that survey is a qualifying activity, and it will be, and it's benefiting me and benefiting the land. So that's the thing to think about if you're doing some of these activities yourself. Just make sure you're using them to your advantage, and that there's a method being used and you're getting something out of them. So as we get to the end of this thing, we're getting close down here pretty quick so y'all can ask some questions. Think about, is wildlife management right for you? Consider your options. Which of the activities are best for you? What are the things you enjoy doing on your property? Does it fit your time and budget? What type of wildlife management fits your time and budget, and which species should I manage for? Consult with a professional biologist. Consult with Plateau. Ask us. Have us do your wildlife management plan. Have us come out and consult with you. We can help you figure out those top 3 questions if you don't know what they are, what you're most interested in, what's most appropriate for your property, those kind of things. A good wildlife management plan, being informed and having a good plan, can help make it easier to maintain, which is going to make it more enjoyable and rewarding. That's the important thing to me. I'm prone to saying our biologists, they're fantastic. They do a wonderful job. They write these wildlife management plans that are detailed and to the owner's specifications, and they take your wants and your needs and your desires and your future goals. They take all that into account, and then they wrap it all into a plan that passes muster with the county and then provides you with the information that you need as well. And sometimes it's a very detailed document. Their job is to give you the absolute best plan you can possibly get. My job and the job of my team and the rest of us here, Cameron Bain and my region managers, the sales team, all of us, our job is to make sure you're not overwhelmed by it, to help you be able to do this and understand it and have it be rewarding. It's got to be for me. If I wasn't enjoying this and it wasn't something fun to do, I'd put cows back on the place in a heartbeat. It's got to be something that I get some enjoyment and some reward out of. I do it now. This is the fun part for me. Personally, I do it because I want to see this. God bless him. I want to see a property that looks like this, more so than this. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that's our property in Garfield, but the first time I saw this picture, I thought it was. I was looking for the house in the background. You've probably all seen a property that looks something like this. A lot of properties will get that way. That property's obviously been grazed a little bit more than it might have needed to. Again, for some folks, it's generally because they want to see the property recover and do the things that they enjoy on the property. These are a couple examples of what can happen if you do it. And if you move into wildlife management, this is a picture on the left of a property that was overgrazed and kind of run down, and no grasses along that stream at all. The next picture is 8 months later. It looks like under wildlife management, the grasses have come back, and the place is starting to is recovering. That bank where you see water in the creek right there, the time of year results in that. And you may have a little less water in that creek, but it's going to run longer because the grasses on the side are going to bank that water. That's what a bank means. The grasses, the roots and things on those side hold the water, and as the stream starts to go down, they allow it to go back in and allow it to run for a longer period of time. Another example, again, this is a great example of a riparian area, a little stream area that probably was just in kind of a runoff area, and leaving it alone and not grazing it allowed those tall grasses to come along, and you're going to have water for a lot longer period of time. Again, different times of year, but you can see the growth that wouldn't have been there otherwise. That place was pretty trampled down up above. Again, those are just interesting examples to show what can happen, and just by being in wildlife management, the properties will recover. So why work with Plateau? I'm going to wind this thing down. We've been around a long time. Professional service, kind of like why you hire a CPA to do your income taxes. Land and wildlife's all we do. We have a family of companies I'll talk about in a second, but with Plateau Land and Wildlife, we do wildlife management plans. We do land and wildlife consulting, property tax consultings for landowners. We're not in any other business ourselves, where we're not a construction company that happens to know how to do this, or a realtor that happens to know how to do this. We have other parts of our company that take care of those things. The largest wildlife firm in Texas. There it is, more than 4,300 landowners, 138 counties. I'm glad these are updated numbers. These are great. And that's where you get that 1,000,000 acres divided by that 4,300. That's a fantastic number of people that we've worked for on some pretty, on the normal sized properties that provide a lot of benefit. I was told the other day that quail are making a comeback in the hill country, and a large part of it is because a lot of these small properties that are no longer grazing for no particular reason, but are in wildlife management, are now being a little better managed, and it's creating this patchwork that quail need. I'm a quail guy, and anytime I hear that, it makes me happy. And it's because of all these landowners, the volume of landowners, not one big landowner, but a bunch of little landowners, a bunch of normal average landowners who are managing their properties a little better. And as a group, they've increased the available habitat to quail in the area. It's kind of cool. I like the fact that we work with. I had a landowner one time talking about quail and said, "What can I do with 50 acres? How am I going to do anything with 30 acres? With quail, how's that going to impact anything?" If we thought that way, we'd have never gotten to 1,000,000 acres. We'd be working with nothing but large, huge properties. And if all none of the smaller properties did any of this, but you put all those landowners together, and all of a sudden we're helping manage, and those landowners of ours are managing 1,000,000 acres. Complete plan implementation just means that we can handle everything. If you decide you don't want to do this stuff yourself, or you need help with it, maybe you live out of the country, maybe you live out of the state, and it's not convenient for you to do the activities yourself, kind of like having a cattle tenant, we'll take care of all of it for you. We have technicians and staff that can manage the whole thing for you, and we're not going anywhere. I have all kinds of horror stories about places and people that someone might have signed up with or had them helping them with their wildlife management plan, and now they can't find them. I got a pure joy out of someone walking in this office a while back, because that had happened to him. The guy they were working with quit responding to him, and he got concerned that maybe none of us are real. So he came here, came to our office, walked in, and we helped him get a wildlife management plan right here. That to me is what we're all about. If I'm not here, if one of my region managers, if the biologist changes, Plateau's not going anywhere. We're going to be around, and there's going to be someone here to help you. The Plateau plan, just briefly includes lots of different things. We can talk more about our wildlife management plans, but that's, the wildlife management plans, we consult and make sure that you're going to get approved. We consult with the CAD, make sure that you qualify before we go very far into the thing. So you're at very little risk, almost no risk, because we are confirming that you're going to be approved. We talk about it, 99.9% of our plans get approved. Main reason for that is that we don't file plans that shouldn't get approved. We know up front if there's an issue, if there's going to be a problem, we tell you, and we help you resolve it before we even worry about trying to think about moving you into wildlife management. We're not going to get you into this if you shouldn't be doing it. You have a site visit with a biologist. The Plateau biologist comes out to the property and visits with you. They do a detailed discussion of the wildlife management activities and your goals. They write a 5-year wildlife management plan, includes your property maps that are very detailed that help you manage the property so you understand the property better. Our representation with the CAD, we file the wildlife management plan and we track it until it's approved. So that's an important point where I don't want that to be overlooked. Not only do we do the wildlife management plan, the applications, we file them for you, and then we track them to make sure that everything's good. And then you end up with a resource notebook, which is a great book that is kind of your guide for the next 5 years. It has your wildlife management plan, all your documents, the recommendations from the biologist, everything y'all talked about, and documentation forms that we created to help you with your documentation going forward. And of course, all of our contact information. And more than anything, when you get a wildlife management plan from Plateau, you have Plateau. You have all of us. You can call here anytime and talk to anybody you want to. And most of it, if we can't answer your question, we'll get you to someone who can. I'm going to touch on this briefly because it's getting late in the season, and hopefully there's some of you here that are interested in doing wildlife management plans, and you want to have us hire. You can still hire us to do it, and we can certainly get it done for you. These are our the pricing right now. This pricing, I should have put a note up here. This pricing is good until the end of this month. I'll extend, if somebody wants to do this thing, I'll extend it a little bit. And you don't have to, it's not like everything has to be done by the end of this month. If you want to do it this year for 2020, has to be filed by April 30th. As long as the plan agreement is in by the end of this month, as long as we have a commitment from you that you want us to do it by the end of this month, these prices are good. After the beginning of April, we have to increase everything by $500 because of the impending deadline. We have people working overtime. We have to bring on additional folks to help us complete them all. We'll have somebody that calls us on April 20th and wants to do a wildlife management plan, and we'll get it done. So I'll work with you. You know, if you are interested in doing this, don't let the late timing here scare you. But those are our general prices. They're done by acres to be fair, so everybody kind of, larger properties pay a little bit more, but not much, and it's a pretty reasonable price for a 5-year plan. It is a one-time fee for a 5-year plan. So that $1,750 or $2,000, whatever it is, that covers you for as far as the filing and the plan process for the next 5 years. And I can talk to you about, if you're interested, I can talk to you about what happens after 5 years, but it's something you can handle. That refile, that update of the plan is something you can handle on your own, or a lot of people hire us to do it, and it's a lot less expensive or a lot less costly. It may be anywhere from $395 to $1,000, depending on if it's just a basic refile or if you want a biologist to come back out to your property. So anyway, those are the basic wildlife management plans. A little bit more just about Plateau. Established in 97, been around a while. Our founders helped establish the wildlife management valuation law. They really understand this. We really understand this stuff well. Have a very good foundation in it. We're Central Texas based, but we've got offices in Bernie and in Houston, in Montgomery now. So we have an office in Houston, or in Houston, Montgomery, have an office in Bernie, and an office in Dripping Springs, right outside of Austin. We serve Central Texas landowners. We've got a staff of wildlife biologists, so they're our people. We don't hire outside biologists. And trained and dedicated field technicians, that's got a soft place in my heart for those guys. It's where I started. They're the guys, they're the folks that are out there on your property. If you need them, if you need us to do the activities for you, and they care as much about these properties, I remember doing it, and it's gratifying work because you're out there and you're doing important work for folks that they're getting some enjoyment and some reward out of. And the other thing to mention is that our biologists are also the plan writing biologists or registered property tax consultants. That's what makes it to where we can file this stuff and we can send it to the county and we can advocate for you if we need to. That's what sets us apart from maybe Texas Parks and Wildlife and someone else who might just write a wildlife management plan for you. We actually file it and then we can advocate for the landowner. We're not a state agency, we're a private company. So if you do have an issue with the county, we can go to bat for you. That's a good time to bring up our family of companies. The family of companies includes Braun and Gresham, who's a law firm that's upstairs from us here. Plateau Exchange, which is a 1031 exchange company, and then Plateau Land Group, which is our real estate company. Braun and Gresham has benefited a lot of our landowners from everything from, most landowners have a lot of the same needs, whether it's, conservation, whether it's estate planning, wills and things like that. Condemnation right now with the pipelines and all the other stuff that's going on. Our landowners have a kind of an inside line to the attorneys at Braun and Gresham. And when landowners have trouble with appraisal districts or have trouble with counties, they're able to help. We're able to do things that some others can't. So that's one of the neat things about our family of companies and how we operate. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we do have all the products and services to help somebody get into I like to say, we got you into this, we'll get you out. Doesn't mean you have to buy these things from us, but I think it makes the decision a lot easier for some folks because they know that if they do get into wildlife management, they can talk to Plateau about the things that they need to move forward. Our biologists will give you recommendations of the things you need on your property, but you can get those things from us too. You don't have to go searching for them. And then if it's something that we don't do or something you're interested in that maybe we don't offer, we can help you find it.
Hey, thank you again for joining us for our webinar today. I hope you found it useful and I hope you enjoyed it. If you still have questions or we can help in any way, please call us or visit our website at plateauwildlife.com and contact us online. Thanks again.